What I wanted to kind of chat about today and just share is really a new tactic that we've seen emerge amongst our own customers, but just in the greater ecosystem as well in the last year or so. And what that is really selling on back order. And another way of saying that is, how do you turn your out of stock your products into some revenue? So I think the first thing that I will say here is I'll repeat a cliche, a very recent cliche that all of you are very familiar with, which is that the pandemic has really disrupted the supply chain for absolutely everyone, introducing significant volatility, significant unpredictability, and really changing the cost structure around that. So when I kind of want to set up this idea and kind of share more about what it means to sell on back order, we have to go back to what kind of your plan A is, or your at the start of that. And the best plan always is like, how do I have the right amount of stock of the right products at the right time? And the one that I wanted to call out there was the right products for brands that have larger product catalogs. Not all of those products are created equally. And the key therefore, when I think through some kind of operational or purchase plan for inventory that makes sense, is we always kind of want to allocate more of our working capital to our better performers versus our weaker performers. So that's where that kind of right amount, right products, right time comes from. That plan is, and we've definitely seen that in the last 2 years, is that nobody over here is the oracle, and nobody can perfectly predict the future. And this, I don't think, just relates to the pandemic. I mean, that's definitely been a black swan event. But even beyond pandemic, in some kind of normal environment, it is very, very hard to kind of truly predict the future. And I think as a tech founder, specifically building solutions for retail brands for the last 13 years of my life, from co-founding WooCommerce, working in Conversion, now working in Cogsy, I always find solutions and software founders overhype things like artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us predict the future, to be very inauthentic, because I don't think that that is really possible at all. The second problem with kind of having right amount of stock, right time, and right amount of that stock is, cash flow considerations kind of prevent you from just buying all the stock that you need, for two main reasons. If we take out the kind of the constraint part thereof, you really kind of there's a subsequent cost in terms of holding the wrong stock or too much stock. So either that's directly in terms of the stock holding cost, or there's some kind of opportunity cost to holding too much stock, i.e., you do not have working capital available to invest in growth initiatives, which means that there is probably that sweet spot of what kind of optimal stock looks like based on the strategy you're employing or the growth trajectory that you are on. And then the last thing is, we've all seen in the last 5-6 years, I mean, even pre-pandemic, that customer acquisition cost across the board has risen significantly. And stock outages makes that more expensive than ever, right? I think the worst kind of user experience or customer experience at this stage is they see your ad on Instagram for which you've paid a hell of a lot of money these days, and they have high purchasing intent. When they click that ad, they get to the website and there's a stock. And very quickly, without going into too much detail, because numbers are generally boring here, but what I try to visualize here is just how quickly like being out of stock affects ultimately conversion rates, and how conversion rate then, lower conversion rate affects, customer acquisition cost. So what you're seeing there is the first two rows there are the same. We assume similar marketing spend, similar amount of visitors to driving to the website, but due to stock outages across those three tiers, then the conversion rate slightly drops, which means number of new customers drop, which means customer acquisition cost is rising. So, and this is just kind of this rise in customer acquisition cost ignores the fact that the greater kind of macro environment is also driving that customer acquisition cost up further. So really, as I said, going back to the previous slide there, with the macro kind of environment already increasing, we're seeing a rise in customer acquisition cost. I think the last thing that brands can afford at this stage is to not have the right stock at the right time and the right amount of those kind of products. So when I then speak about kind of what I'm really kind of proposing here is that this is a really great plan B for what I anticipate is a reimagined supply chain. So if you listen to any kind of any expert that tells you about kind of supply chain, the logistics involved, where they expect things will land, the best case at this stage sounds something like in the next 12 to 18, maybe 24 months, we will see supply chain normalize again to kind of pre-pandemic state. I think what is interesting for me is when I'm chatting to progressive brands and operators at this stage, really making plans for a fully kind of reimagined supply chain, where the thing that I'm seeing pop off, up often in those conversations, is thinking through how do I not just use a single manufacturer that's maybe based in Asia, because that's the way we've always done that. How do I look at and add to the mix onshore manufacturer? Yes, the cost will be higher, but it's likely as kind of I've got more predictable supply, and my lead times from that kind of manufacturer is significantly shorter. And then how do I balance these two things to still make my unit economics work, right? So to that extent, I think we're truly going to see kind of new tactics, new solutions, new ways of connecting and working with manufacturers pop up to create this wholly kind of reimagined supply chain. And I think for the interim, and what we've definitely seen with our customers, is that selling on back order is just a great plan B until all of these other things kind of shake out, and or you're able to normalize your plan A, which is to be in stock of the right products at the right time. So just talking about back orders in the way that Cogsy at least defines back orders is we definitely call them customer-centric back orders. And the reason we do that is for this kind of highlighted bit over here. So Caraway is a customer of ours. They were selling on back order before they started working with us, at least, and were a big influence in the way we built this functionality. But the idea there is that there really is, instead of just saying, hey, this product is on back order, what the brands are doing, the brands that are killing it are doing in a sense, is they really add that transparency to the customer and say, this product next ships on X date. And as you can see there for Caraway's bakeware set, some of their variants of some of the colors next available on February 28th. So they do this when they are out of stock for the SKU at this stage, but they know they continue selling in the interim because the demand is still there, and this converts at a significantly higher rate. And that's what I try to show here, right? So selling, continuing to sell when you're out of stock is not the principle, the concept is not new. It is something that brands have done in the past. But I wanted to map this out on kind of just comparing conversion rate, right? So like when you are out of stock of certain products, the first option you have is you don't have to sell at all, where we can then imply that for those products and the interest you have from those customers, you will have a 0% conversion rate. The second thing that I see brands do is use some kind of static pre-order functionality, which mostly looks like when this product is out of stock, we change the add now or add to cart or buy now button to just say pre-order. And interesting enough, I think for me, at least, when I see those things, it feels like backing a Kickstarter campaign and not knowing, like, is the brand or the company going to fulfill this product or this order this year, next year, or ever, right? I think we all have those hairy stories to tell from backing Kickstarter campaigns that never came to fruition. Interesting though, if you have a look at all those kind of pre-order kind of solutions out there, none of them are actually publicizing what their conversion rate is. And I suspect it is, I can only infer that it's really, really low. Then the second last thing, before we get to customer-centered back orders, that brands do use is some form of back in stock notification, which means if you're out of stock for a certain product, you will allow the customer or prospect to enter their details. You'll email them when, and they can decide to make the purchase then. Typically what we see, that converts 5 to 15% of that interest at least. And then the last one, we have customer-centered back orders, where 80% is does not necessarily use the widest kind of population sample size at this stage. But what we do see is that brands that use customer-centric back orders, for those SKUs compared to SKUs that are in stock, the conversion rate rarely kind of differs. So in this case, like we're proposing, it's probably about a 15 to 20% difference in that conversion rate, which makes selling on back order, especially if you can share that next available shipping date, a really attractive proposition. And then just kind of why that works, the kind of 2 points without going into too much detail is, firstly, sharing that date gives the customer complete transparency, shapes their expectations, and actually creates trust and confidence on their side. And the second is, you are kind of striking when the iron is most hot, when the purchasing intent is highest, which is why I think something like back in stock notifications don't convert as well. Ultimately, someone wanting to buy a product now and they get an email 6 weeks later, the purchasing intent might not be as high anymore. Before I share how you can replicate this on your own, I just want to share this very quickly. And this is something I also got from Mark Riskovitz, who's the head of operations over at Caraway. And he speaks about the flipped cash conversion cycle. So what I try to map out here very quickly is a simple cash conversion cycle, assuming you have to pay a deposit stock, then pay for the remainder when the stock is available to ship from your manufacturer. What you're essentially seeing is you're only going to be cash flow positive on 127 days. What happens when you sell on back order is, assuming kind of similar sales velocity at least, because you can start shipping sooner, i.e. as soon as you have some kind of predictable and or a delivery date from your manufacturer that you are confident with, and you start selling, it essentially reduces the time to reach some kind of cash flow positivity significantly, right? So it completely flips your cash conversion cycle. And if you overlay actually getting terms with your, or payment terms with your manufacturer, this looks even better, right? Because you can start, you don't have the cash outlays initially, you have them much later as well. And depending on how quickly you start selling on back order, you're cash flow positive much sooner. So I told you that I would share last 3 minutes here, how you can run this yourselves. And there's really 3 kind of components to how you can enable customer-centric back orders. And the first thing is to have a real-time kind of demand forecast and a purchasing plan. So essentially figuring out, like, at what kind of your clip do I expect to sell on a per product basis going forward, and how does that match up with the purchase plan that I have in place? And real time is important here, because a kind of spike in sales in a single morning might kind of offset the plan. And similarly, a kind of your changed ETA on a purchase order, incoming purchase order, will also change what kind of date you are able to show and commit to with a customer that does purchase a product on back order. The second part here, I think this is crucially important, and many other brands switching to Cogsy switch because it is such a hard task to do this manually, but really automating that next available shipping date whenever it is changing. So again, in a supply chain and in a world that's fast moving and ever changing, being able to recalculate that date in near real time allows you to kind of communicate that date to customers with confidence, and then ultimately get that trust from their side. And then the last part I think is important, which is trying to get inventory and the idea of inventory beyond just the or the operations team's kind of realm, and actually getting alignment across all the functions of business. So having a dashboard and a fulfillment process where operations, your customer experience team or support team, they know what's kind of which products are out of stock, what the ETA is there when they get requests. But similarly, getting your growth team aligned with this, where they know that if a product is out of stock, let's not kind of pump the budget on promoting those products right now, because conversion rate will be lower. So really having a single place that gets all individuals cross-functionally from the team in there and have that visibility into what's happening is crucial to get the team aligned and to get Backorders to function in the way that it could. That's it for me. As I stop sharing my screen there, there's detail over there. Feel free to ask me any questions after this, firstly, as well as just email me directly at Adii@Cogsy. More than happy to show you what we've built, or just chat about inventory, backorders, and anything else in the space.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. And you are hearing it first. There is a Cogsy and ShipBob integration coming soon. So please stay tuned for that.